Our longtime member, Robert Stewart, passed away. He had an apparent heart attack when he was out doing his daily walk, and they were not able to revive him. I talked with his wife, Carol, last night, and she's doing as well as you could expect. They have one son, Will, and his wife, and their baby are driving up today from Florida. It was, you probably could have given me that information about almost anybody, since most of us are older, but I never expected to hear it about Robert. It was such a shock. I'm sure you're feeling the same way. Robert was one of the finest men I know. And I know that this is going to be hard for us individually as we process it, and also a big loss for the congregation, because he was such he was a man of all seasons. Whatever you needed done, check with Robert. I think it's important that we remember that how fragile life is and how we're not guaranteed the next moment.
Yeah.
That is part of existentialism, is that we encourage you to live in the moment because we don't know that there will be a next. To let yourself have your feelings, to sit with them, and to reach out to others and share with others how you're feeling. Get the support, give the support, and also definitely think about Robert's family, his wife, his son, daughter-in-law, baby. God, he loved that baby. He talked about that baby all the time.
Yeah.
And I know he has a sister. He also has a mother who is 100 years old, who lives in Alabama. I know she must be absolutely devastated. I cannot even imagine what she's going through. So please just, let yourself be sad, let yourself feel what you're feeling, but keep in mind too that Robert lived the kind of life that when you do pass away, that people will remember you because of the good things that you did. Remember all the wonderful things that he did, and how precious it was when he would come in on Sunday mornings. And anyway, so as I receive any information from Carol, I will pass that on. She did indicate that she would like to, at some point, have a service here for Robert, and certainly we would do that in any way. So think good thoughts about the family and take care of yourself.
I think as with so many of us, Robert was the first person that greeted me when I first walked in the door here.
Me too.
And he's been a wonderful friend, and he's really made me a better person. I've got this prepared. I'm going to go on with it because I know that's what Robert would have wanted. He wouldn't want any changes, so we're just going to just go and dedicate this service to Robert and his family. St. Francis of Assisi said, "All the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of a single candle." And I think Robert is that candle. Welcome to the first Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta's Celebration of Life. My name is Jan Lister, and I will be your facilitator today. Better? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Our musician today is the wonderful Mick Kenny. And we're going to start with the congregational song. Mick, can you tell us what it's going to be?
Yeah, so we're going to do, let's do number 68 in the Pink Book.
We are a philosophically based spiritual community dedicated to human liberation and founded on existentialist and feminist principles. By existentialist principles, we mean that we are what we do in the world, and we accept responsibility for our actions and our choices. By feminist principles, we mean that we accept and actively support freedom and justice for every person. We support diversity as a source of strength, and we actively include everyone. We make our spiritual home in the Old Stone Church, which was hand-built 100 years ago by the African-American Antioch East Baptist Church. We honor their labors of love and the powerful history of this very special place, which was deliberately and maliciously taken away from them. We acknowledge that our spiritual home stands on land that was forcibly taken from the Muscogee Creek people, and we support justice and equality for all Indigenous people. At this time, I'd like to remind you to please put your electronic devices on silent. Feel free to wander around if you want to, but please do so quietly and respectfully. Our speaker today is the wonderful Robert Baker, whose topic is the strange origins of religious tolerance in North America. Excuse me. Robert sent me a teaser about his speech today. So my mom always had a Kleenex in her purse. I picked up the habit. Europe's 17th century was an era of religious war and bloodshed. It culminated in the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, perceived as an existential conflict between Catholics and Protestants. In the midst of this, Puritans in England set sail for North America. We know their story as a quest for religious freedom, but they were fleeing the bishops of the Anglican Church, largely because they were tolerant. In the eyes of those who wished to purify the Anglican Church, tolerance was an aberration. In the words of one Puritan prelate, tolerance stinks in God's nostrils. So the Puritans who landed in Massachusetts Bay wanted to establish a perfect religious commonwealth, but a hearty contradiction lay in their vision. They believed in religious truth and thus orthodoxy. But they also believed that religious truth was established through biblical interpretation rather than authority. Very quickly, they proved unable to contain heterodox opinions. True, the Puritan leaders of Massachusetts did their level best, getting consensus opinion on orthodox religious tenets, silencing the dissenters, and banishing the outspoken. And one of the most intolerant of these settlers, the most Puritan of Puritans, ultimately argued that the only proper way to enforce religious orthodoxy was to fully separate church and state. It was regarded as absurd, the delusions of a madman, and one of the great sources for the First Amendment. As usual, Robert's speech today promises to be thought-provoking and a fascinating learning experience, as it also always is, and not to mention timely. In 3 recent cases, the Supreme Court decided against the First Amendment prohibition of the government endorsement of any particular religion in what is called the Establishment Clause. In May, the conservative majority ruled in favor of a Christian group that wanted to fly a flag emblazoned with the cross over Boston City Hall. In June, they endorsed taxpayer money paying for students to attend religious schools under a Maine tuition assistance program. Also in June, they backed an American football coach at a Washington State public high school who was suspended for refusing to stop leading Christian prayers with players on the field after games. In that last case, they decided that rather than it flying in the face of the First Amendment's commitment to religious neutrality, it was instead protected by other parts of the amendment, those that protect freedom of speech and the free exercise of religion. I'm excited to hear what Robert has to tell us today, and how can we reflect on today's court? Maybe. I have a quote from John F. Kennedy. I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell a president he shouldn't be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote. Where no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference, and where no man is denied public office merely because his religion differs from the president who might appoint him or the people who might elect him. I would live in an America that is officially neither Catholic, Protestant, nor Jewish, where no public official either requests or accepts instructions on public policy from the Pope, the National Council of Churches, or any other ecclesiastical source, where no religious body seeks to impose its will directly or indirectly upon the general populace or the public access of their officials, and where religious liberty is so indivisible that an act against one church is treated as an act against all. So, now we'd like to recognize any newcomers that might be here today for the first or second time, or been gone for a while. Yeah, stand up, please. Tell us who you are.
I'm Jacob Hunter.
And my name is Fabienne Horn.
It's our first time here.
And how did you find out about us?
Through the magic of Google.
Welcome. Don't you love Google? It's like the greatest. I Google everything. Are y'all here in the neighborhood?
We're in Grant Park.
Oh, okay, so very close. Well, thank you so much for coming. It's great to see you.
Thank you for welcoming us.
I'm Mackenzie Bristow, and I'm an educator, and I also
I'm sorry, hold on. Can you use the mic?
of course, my name is Mackenzie Bristow, and I live in Decatur, and I also found you through the magic of Google.
Thank you so much. Wow, a lot of new people here. This is wonderful.
I'm John Cristrill. I was a long-time member, but have been coming for a while. I moved to Brookhaven, but I love Robert, so I want to be around people who also love Robert this morning.
Oh, good.
Any other new people? Wow, this is wonderful to see so many new faces here today. I just want to point out that inside the little pamphlet we have the connection card, and if you're so inclined, you can fill that out, and you can opt to get Robert's weekly email. The weekly email. It will always be Robert's. And, or the newsletter, which I edit, and I'm very proud of. And so, please, or you want to just tell us more about yourself, or if you want to know more about us, please fill this out. And you can drop it in the collection plate when we pass that around later. Okay, now this is a time to celebrate anyone who's present, who may be celebrating a milestone, like a birthday or anniversary, or just a special occasion. Jean, is it your birthday?
Today is my birthday.
All right. Is it today? It is today. All right.
And I am old, so please sing enthusiastic.
Nobody else is? Oh, Kathy, come on up here, Kathy.
My birthday is the 13th.
Close enough.
And Clint and I have our 19th wedding anniversary on the 19th.
Wow. Well, we should sing 2 songs to you then.
Yeah.
And it's good to see Ian here. I almost didn't recognize you. Your hair's gotten so long. Okay, which one first? Birthday or anniversary?
Birthday.
Birthday.
Anniversary?
Happy birthday.
Well,
Yeah, we're going to do the first four verses of number 3, We Shall Overcome.
everything else, and just God, you have such a gorgeous voice. I'd like to remind everybody here, probably not necessary, but if you should desire childcare, we ask that you make reservations a week ahead of time. And if anybody has any community announcements, please bring them up to me during the service, and I will read them at the end of the service. Marcia, do you want to say anything else? At this time, I'd like to ask our fellowship minister, Marcia Mixner, to come up.
Just, I think one of the things I'd like to say to our newcomers is I'm very excited that you are here this morning. I'm sorry that it's a day of sadness for us, but I hope that what this does is it gives you a glimpse into who we really are, because we are people who believe very much in how important it is to live our lives with authenticity, which means to express ourselves when we are feeling grief, as well as when we are excited and feeling great gratitude and joy. So I'm glad you're here, and I hope that you will come back and find us being very joyful and expressing ourselves in that way. And I have brought a card that is on the back table right outside the kitchen. It's a card that's addressed to Carol and Robert's family. I would appreciate if everyone would sign that, and we'll send that to Carol. Also, there's a card for Rita Furman. I know that most of you don't know Rita, but she's been here as long as I've been here, and that's since 1980, and but she's always been behind the scenes. Rita has always been back behind the scenes, but she has done so much for this congregation. And she turns 90 next Sunday, and so I would appreciate it if you would also sign the card, birthday card for her, and I will take it to her next Sunday. So, again, just please be your authentic self and let yourself have your feelings, and know that life goes on. And so I'm really looking forward to what Dr. Baker has to say. I always enjoy his perspective on things, and it helps to keep me grounded. So thank you all for being here, and take care of yourself.
Thank you.
I don't know how long it actually was. My alarm on my clock still said 4 minutes and 29 seconds. A second ago, so I was like, wait a minute, something's not right here. That felt good. We worry a great deal about the problem of church and state. Now, what about the church and God? Sometimes there seems to be a greater separation between the church and God than between church and state. And that's from Abraham Joshua Heschel. Those who would renegotiate the boundaries between church and state must therefore answer a difficult question. Why would we trade a system that has served us so well for one that has served others so poorly? From Sandra Day O'Connor. And it's now time for another congregational song. Rick?
Let's do number 107, Imagine.
107, Imagine. Please stand as you're willing and able. Posted this song online. She had gone on this website, where you can find out your pirate name and all that kind of stuff. And this one was, what song reflects you? And she had posted some Guns N' Roses song. It was, not something that I would have been pleased with, but I went on and did mine, and the song that came up was Imagine. And I thought, it's a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's now time for Joy, Sorrows, and Milestones together from James Madison. And this is from Michael Ian Black. I do not go to church. I don't go to Christian church or Jew church or any other church. I don't go to church at all, not ever. A perfect Sunday for me is spent drinking green tea while reading the Sunday New York Times. Yikes. Why don't I just turn in my Al-Qaeda membership form and call it a day? As if that wasn't bad enough, not only do I not go to church, I don't believe in God. How can I say the Pledge of Allegiance if I don't believe in God? How can I spend our American currency with pledges in God we trust? How can I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help me God? Answer, I can't. It's a real problem. Don't get me wrong, I'd like to believe in God. I wish I did, especially if he was the kind of God that thought America was number one. But I don't, which to many people is the same as not believing in America. We are a generous and giving congregation. Winston Churchill said, we make a living by what we get, we make a life by what we give. And from one of my heroes, Anne Frank, no one has ever become poor by giving. So if we can get a couple of people to pass the plate, and Mika's going to play some special music for us.
In honor of our speaker today, I thought it was something from Holly Near.
I just want to give you a reminder to bring your community announcements to me, and I'll read them after the service if you haven't already. If nobody has, so you haven't. Our featured speaker today is Robert Baker, H. Robert Baker is Associate Professor of History at Georgia State University and is author of Prigg versus Pennsylvania, Slavery, the Supreme Court, and the Ambivalent Constitution from 2012, and The Rescue of Joshua Glover, a Fugitive Slave, the Constitution, and the Coming of the Civil War from 2006. His scholarly articles have appeared in the Law and History Review, Commonplace, and the Journal of the Supreme Court History. He holds a Ph.D. in history from UCLA, where he studied with Joyce Appleby. He has been a Fulbright Fellowship and a fellow at the Institute for Constitutional Studies. He also writes about wine, law, and contemporary culture for the blog Tropics of Meta. I personally think he's just a great storyteller. I just love to listen to him because it's like listening to stories. And when he speaks, I can close my eyes and I can see the places and the people and the times that he's talking about. And it's just always fun. So, looking forward to this. Please welcome Robert Baker.
Thanks to everybody for being here. I'm a little distracted this morning for obvious reasons, but I'm going to do my best. And I think really in the spirit within which, and some of you may not know, I actually live in Los Angeles now, so I'm only here for a 2-week period, and Robert had actually written back and forth with me to get me here because I've been doing virtual presentations, and this was the one chance I would have to come and speak. So I'm very, very glad to be here, and of course, incredibly sad that I won't see Robert. But in honor of him, I think I'm going to just try to make the Puritans funny. So maybe we could all laugh a little. And by the way, it's not hard to make the Puritans funny. I mean, they're very serious people. There's no doubt about that. The Puritans are kind of legendary for this. And, very commonly said that a Puritan was somebody who lived in constant fear that somebody somewhere was having a good time. and this is something I think that is largely true about the Puritans. They were very serious people. And they were fundamentalists. If you don't really know, and I'm not going to talk theology today, so I won't talk about puritanical theology or the theological disputes, but what you have to know is that they read every word of the Bible, and if it wasn't in the Bible, it wasn't true, and they were highly intellectually developed. They had arguments and debates all the time. They actually did believe it or not, they believed in science, they believed in philosophy, just so long as they could square with the Bible. It was this very complicated sort of cosmology that they were all part of. And they were disliked in England because they didn't like to have a good time. They were always complaining that on the Sabbath people would do things like play football, that they would dance around the maypole when it was Maytime. And they wanted the maypoles taken down. They wanted the stained glass out of churches because stained glass isn't in the Bible. They didn't want pianos, no music like that, only biblical instruments, which led to some very interesting music that survives in some churches to this day, but not many, thank goodness. Anyway, so these are the Puritans, and it's not hard to see why they were persecuted in England. In England, the church was what we would call latitudinarian, which meant that it was just a Big Ten church. Everybody come in, everybody can, provided you're Protestant. If you were Catholic, you probably weren't going to survive. In fact, there's a lot of people killed in England during this time. But if you were Protestant, and even if you were nonconformist, if you didn't conform to the doctrines of the church would kind of turn a blind eye. This was a Big Ten church. And this is what upset Puritans. They leave for New England because they don't like the tolerance of the English church. So these are the people that were looking for religious freedom. Now, by the way, they were persecuted because as the Puritans became more and more obnoxious, and they do get quite obnoxious, eventually they were called before the Court of High Commission, and they were forced to take a religious test. And by the way, if you don't know, this is a specific part of our Constitution. There is the test clause, which says that no religious test will be required for you to hold office or ever given to anybody. So it's a nice thing that they would force Puritans to do this, and that would violate their conscience. And so they all said, let's move to New England. You know, it's great New England. We'll move to this Massachusetts Bay, and we'll create a perfect commonwealth. And a perfect commonwealth would be one where everybody would be Puritan. And as Paul Endicott, one of these first Puritans to arrive in Massachusetts, 1629, 1630, said, we're all God's people, meaning just the Puritans, by the way. We are all the elect, and where all of God's people are together, there can be no dissent. He had never seen a reality television show. This was about to become the biggest reality television show, I think, in all of American history. This colony will undergo more turmoil in its first 5 years than any other colony really ever established, if you accept Virginia, where everybody died. That would be a reality show. So Massachusetts, and what I wanted to do actually was just talk about one of the men that was invited very early. It comes in the second year of the colony. And he's a name that probably some people know. It was Roger Williams. And he was a fiery preacher in England. He was a really good preacher. He electrified congregations. He was a stand-up performer in a lot of ways. You know, he was not just really, really smart. He could out-argue absolutely everybody. But he would just get people excited about what they were learning. And so Roger Williams, and by the way, he had a tremendous impact on what Puritans referred to. You can guess which this is, the more influential sex. So, you know, definitely not very politically correct, but this is, he really, really influenced women in congregations. He converted a lot of people to a kind of puritanical Puritanism, you know, Protestantism. And so Roger Williams, it didn't hurt, by the way, he was really good looking. So Roger Williams comes out to New England, and everybody's excited, and he gets offered the Boston church. So they want him to pastor in Boston. This is the #1 church in all of New England, and everybody's excited. And Roger Williams shows up and says, "You're not a separatist, or you are still part of the English church. I will not minister to you. I will only minister to people who are separated from the church." He's that Puritan. He is more Puritan than anybody there. And so they say, okay, well, we're sorry. And then he's called to Salem, which is the most conservative of all the congregations. And he goes there and says, "You are too liberal for me. I'm not going to preach to you either." And so, and now it's kind of like, well, what are you doing here, Roger? I mean, what exactly is it you do here? He doesn't really know what he's going to do. So he's kind of bouncing around, and then eventually he takes off and he leaves Massachusetts altogether. He ends up in Plymouth, where the Pilgrims are, and they're separatists, so he likes that. And he stays there for a while, and then he comes back and he says, "Okay, I think I'm ready to preach now." And they say, "Well, are you still a separatist?" And he says, "Well, yes, but I'll preach to you if you're not separatist, but I want to make it very clear that you are all living in sin right now, because what you are doing is using the arm of the state to enforce religion." And of course they are, by the way. They create a biblical code in Massachusetts. Everybody's living by this biblical code. And they say, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, it is, of course, a sin to compel people to believe a certain thing, right? I mean, this is why you left England. And therefore, the civil magistrate has no business enforcing matters of conscience." They say, "Well, no, we're not going to let you preach if you do that." So again, he leaves. He walks out of the Massachusetts Bay settlement, and he ends up with the Narragansett Indians, and he's a missionary to the very powerful Narragansett tribe. And so he's gone for a couple of years doing this. He goes back to Plymouth, and then Roger Williams comes back yet again to Massachusetts. And this time, of course, again, everybody wants him to preach. And he comes back and says, "Great, I will preach now." He says, "First of all, you should be separatist, because we all know that the Church of England is not the right way to go. Oh, and it is, of course, a sin for you to be using that civil arm, civil magistrate, to enforce matters of religion." He said, "And I've been studying the patent," and that's, by the way, the charter that establishes Massachusetts Bay. It had been granted by the king, and it was given to the first people who settled there. And he examines this patent and says, "There's a problem here. The king didn't own any of this land. Like, none of it. So the king couldn't grant it." The land belongs to the Narragansett. Now, it's easy to believe this doesn't sound very 17th century. And I would say Roger Williams was all alone on this point, but he actually makes that argument. So he's the first kind of woke colonist. He's now not only saying, hey, we need to get the state out of private conscience, and, oh, by the way, you need to be super, super religious or I won't preach to you, but now he's saying that they all live on stolen land. This, by the way, is enough. They're like, okay, that's it. You're banished. We're going to just banish you. And he says, no, I'm not going anywhere. But he won't be called to preach except in Salem. And so in Salem, they end up welcoming him into the church, and he preaches there. Now at this point, and this is where I apologize. I'm a little distracted today, so I'm maybe not setting this up so well. But this struggle with Roger Williams is happening at a moment when the entire colony is in turmoil because the king actually is interested in turning it into a royal colony, which would mean, by the way, that the Puritan church would be ended. And so everybody was concerned about this. And they're also concerned because a whole load of new ultra-Puritans have arrived who have decided that everybody's doing it wrong in Massachusetts. And so they want even stricter control and stricter discipline. And you have your first divided elections that are happening. And by the way, this is 3 years into the colony's existence. This whole idea that they would all be one and the same faith, it's not working out. It's not working out. And in fact, Winthrop, who's the original governor, and all of the original settlers, they lose their power to this new group of people. And the first thing that this new group of people do is they require an oath. It's an oath to the colony, and it's an oath to the magistrates, and it would require everybody to swear upon God that they would follow the civil leaders of the colony. And so they go around and they start administering the oath in various towns and villages, and they get to Salem. And Roger Williams says, I'm not taking that oath. It is wicked to make a man swear to God and put his conscience out to support civil authority, and I won't do it. And they say, well, we can't compel you to actually say the words and take the oath, but the punishment for not doing that, for not saying those words, is banishment. And he said, very well, banish me. So, and of course they say, no problem, we'll do that, except that now he's started a movement. And other people start refusing to take the oath. Well, you can't banish everybody. As it turns out, if it was a reality show, they just all would have voted Roger Williams off the island after day one, but it doesn't work out that way. So Roger Williams is now in a position where he is leading this kind of incipient movement against authority. And this authority, by the way, is the new authority that is now saying that they have even more power to enforce religious law, and in particular to look into and require church discipline. So they're going to make sure that everybody believes the right things. And so at this point, Roger Williams has refused to take the oath, and he's now leading a movement against it, and there is a massive turmoil. There's an election, and in the election, the hardliners actually lose. So now you've got a situation where Boston is split into 2 or 3 different camps, the colony around it, and nobody knows how to bring everybody back together. And it's, again, Roger Williams who publishes a long paper. And the paper lays out these 4 points. He starts off by saying, we live on stolen land, so our entire charter is invalid. We don't really own any of these homes that we're in. Second, we need to formally separate from the English Church. 3, the civil magistrate cannot enforce any kind of matters of conscience. Now, this is kind of an interesting idea. This is actually where we start getting to the idea of separation of church and state. He wasn't saying that the civil magistrate couldn't enforce behavioral laws that affect your behavior. And that included a lot of things that we might think of as moral. So, for instance, punishing adultery was something he believed that the civil magistrate could do. But he did not believe that the civil magistrate could ever require an oath of conscience from you or examine your beliefs to see if they were true or not. The 4th point he makes is that, and okay, that one just jumped out of my head. It doesn't matter. Really, it's his first 3 points that really, really matter. And it would ultimately lead to Roger Williams being tried. Oh, I'm sorry, the fourth is the oath. He refuses to take the oath. And a new oath is put forward that they think solves the problems, and he refuses to take that as well. And so finally, with this paper published, it gets out, it's disseminated all across the colony, Roger Williams is called to a trial. And it occurs, by the way, in what the Puritans called a church. Most of them would just call it a wood frame house with a dirt floor, which is what it was. It was simple wooden benches. It was very democratic in its organization. And all of the deputies and assistants in all of Massachusetts Bay, there's 25 of them, come in. And they are the general court, which means, by the way, that they will serve as the judges in this trial. They are also, by the way, the prosecutors. They're the ones that are actually bringing the charges. And they're the jury. They get to vote at the end. And Roger Williams sits there. And they say, is it true that you believe that we live on stolen land? Is it true that you believe we don't have the power to actually enforce any of our laws that pertain to conscience? Is it true that you refuse to take the oath? And is it true that you are a separatist? And Roger Williams says, yes. It's just that. He acknowledges, he never says that he didn't do any of these things, but he does argue with them. In the end, they banish him. And Roger Williams is forced to leave the colony. He goes actually back to the Narragansett. He bounces around and he ends up establishing a new town. Providence is its name. He gives it a good religious name. And Providence will ultimately become a place for refugees, many of them from Massachusetts. So as Massachusetts tries to enforce its discipline, many people start fleeing to Providence. Providence actually grows and it becomes a pretty decent colony. He's one of the first people to work out peace treaties with the Indians around him, and the Narragansett in particular, who welcomed him in and allowed him this space in Providence. And in 1642, and again in 1662, he will achieve a royal charter. And in that charter, there is this wonderful phrase where they say, and it's actually remarkable, because if you've ever read these, I'm a legal historian, so I read a lot of law, and there's nothing more boring or formulaic than law. But the Rhode Island Charter has this one phrase in it, where it says that Roger Williams believes in this lively experiment, this is what they call it, a lively experiment, that the civil and the religious authority could be separated, that they would be distinct. And so Rhode Island, when it is finally incorporated as a colony, becomes the first of the colonies to have a true separation. It wasn't the first tolerant colony, and this is one of the things that is important to know. There were other places where this was practiced. But what makes Rhode Island significantly different during this time is that it was attracting refugees, religious refugees. And this makes Providence grow at a time when Massachusetts starts to actually stagnate. And I talked here about the strange origins of religious tolerance. It was out of that intolerance of Boston, out of the intolerance of Massachusetts, that religious radicals are ultimately invited into a place like Providence. And so much so, by the way, that by the time you get to the 1680s, William Penn is able to establish his colony. William Penn, by the way, was very wealthy. William Penn was a Quaker merchant and from a very famous family. And when William Penn establishes Pennsylvania, he does so explicitly as a place where there will be religious tolerance. And it very quickly becomes the largest of any of the colonies. It attracts religious refugees not just from England, not just from Ireland, but also from Germany. Some of the largest German communities are there in Pennsylvania, and they are all fleeing what is increasingly an intolerant Europe. In fact, all the religious warfare that had been mentioned before by Jan, which was in the teaser, the 17th century was this horrible war. You have bloodshed over whether you cross yourself with 3 fingers or 2, or whether you believe when you take communion you're eating actually the flesh of Christ, or if you believe it's a metaphor. This is why people would kill each other. It was a horrible time. And in 1648, when the war's end, the states say, right, that's it. Everybody has to be the same faith. Wherever you are, you're the faith of the ruler, and that's it. And this intolerance, and it extends to England as well, by the way. This intolerance is what people flee to come into North America. Again, it's the irony of it, that what you have is an intolerant Puritan society that ultimately cannot contain the heterodoxy within it. And this is how we get somebody like Roger Williams, and this is how eventually we get somebody like William Penn. Now, I don't want to belabor this too much, so I wanted to just finish up by mentioning how Roger Williams ends his days. He ended in disputation. So he perpetually exacerbates the problems with Massachusetts, never on good relations. And he just wrote tract after tract, including one that would become quite famous. And it's got the best title of any religious tract I've ever read. It's called On the Bloody Tenet of Religious Persecution. So he swears in the title. I mean, that's actually a swear word in the 17th century. He puts it right up in the title, The Bloody Tenet of Religious Persecution. And he is constantly in these pamphlet wars with people back in Massachusetts. And it would ultimately lead one of those Puritan ministers to say, at the very end of his days, just before Roger Williams dies, he said, Rhode Island is a place where you will find Anabaptists, you'll find Antinomians, you'll find every measure of crackpot there. Everybody except Catholics and real Christians. Anyway, so this was the, I thank you all for indulging me here. I had something slightly different prepared, but I wanted to lighten it up a little bit. I hope I did something to make the Puritans seem a little bit less dour, or at least Roger Williams, who was a little bit less dour than maybe his compatriots. But thank you all very much.
You know, every time Robert speaks, I tell him, I really want to sit in on one of your classes, and he's always like, come ahead. And I never do, because I'm lazy. And now that he's in LA, I'm very sorry that I never did that, because now I'm not going to have a chance, and that makes me sad. Because it's just always wonderful listening to you. You're just fun. And, it's like I said, it's like you're listening to a storyteller. It's always exciting. Well, I guess we don't have any community announcements. Before we have our closing remarks, we're going to do one more congregational song. So, Mick.
Let's get together.